Sorry, take two, technical difficulties. Anyway, so after he had started this book, somebody in his family found this picture and they're like, hey, look, you were climbing on the rain gutters just like the character in the book. So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Which leads me to the next part. A lot of you talked about how the role of memory is a inconstant and interesting thing, and how the narrator forgets things and remembers things and has kind of this exchange of what really happened and what didn't happen and what did he imagine happened, and then at the end we're not really sure how often he's returned to the Hemstock's place. In the interview with Aaron Morgenstern, the one that you have to pay for, which again I'm sorry about, I thought I found one for free but didn't work. It's like the story of my life. Anyway, he said that the narrator is him, but it's also not him. And yes, he walked on rain gutters or whatever these things are. So it was him, but the character wasn't him. And he said that writing is this very odd thing where it's both what you do and what you don't do. It's both what you've done and what you haven't done. He said in here at one point, thank you to my family member. I think that was in the acknowledgments, or maybe that was in the interview too. You know, thank you to my family members who are still talking to me after I've written this, for understanding that this is who I am but also who I'm not. And I think that presents really interesting opportunities for writers to consider, because that's what we do. We need to convey little pieces of who we are in the fiction for it to read off as authentic. But we also have to be okay with changing things that don't suit the story. I like to say there's no such thing as 100% fiction and 100% nonfiction, because really each one feeds the other. And I think that is important to realize, and that's certainly what he did here. He also said that this had all started as a short story for his wife. A short story. And then as he worked on it and chipped away at the art of it, he then realized that it wasn't a short story. Maybe it was a novel. But then as he wrote it more and then edited it from there, it was more a novella. It's okay to not know what you're writing as you're writing it. It's okay, writers. It's okay to not know what you're writing as you're writing it. So give yourself permission to figure stuff out as you go. And NaNoWriMo, and if you don't know, NaNoWriMo's National Novel Writing Month. And NaNoWriMo, the co-municipal liaison, and I like to say that you're either a plotter or a pantster, right? You're somebody who plots every action in the story from the beginning, and all you do is sit down and you write it. Or you're a pantster, where you fly off the seat of your pants as you go. And it's okay to be a plantster, someone who plots a little and then still kind of does whatever you want. And I think he said in, I think it was the YouTube interview, that he didn't even try to plot this, because he said he kind of wanted to let go of that feeling that he had to control everything as he wrote it. James Salas, who wrote the book, which was then turned into the movie with Ryan Gosling called Drive, said the same thing. He said he wrote that in a weekend, which was also mind-blowing, but he said that he wrote that in a weekend because if the reader is trying to figure out of suspense what's going to happen next, it's easier if the writer feels the same way. So it's kind of an interesting thought. A couple quotes I want to pull out. Page 4. I make art. Sometimes I make true art, and sometimes it fills the empty places in my life. Some of them, not all. I thought that was very poetic for a writer to say that. Page 6. As we age, we become our parents, live long enough, and we see faces repeat in time. Josh said that he thought this was a cliched line, and I agree that the we become our parents parts is cliched, but I like what follows. Live long enough and we see faces repeat in time. I kind of liked that, and I also thought it might be foreshadowing if Letty, Mrs. Hemstock, and old Mrs. Hemstock are all the same character. Page 7, memories were waiting at the edges of things, beckoning to me. Page 9, I liked that. Books were safer than people anyway. I think all writers think that at some point or another. Page 12, I knew you could not simply replace something alive. I think if you've ever had a pet, a beloved pet pass away, you know that to be true. Page 15, is my comic there or did they steal it? I don't know. The police didn't mention your comic. I think that was really interesting. That kept the narrative childlike for me. This idea that, okay, their car has been stolen. The opal miner has just died in it. And yet the 7-year-old is mostly concerned with the comic. Page 17. The plagues that explained who they were also told me that the majority of them had murdered their families and sold their bodies to anatomy. It was then that the word anatomy garnered its own edge of horror for me. I did not know what anatomy was. I knew only that anatomy made people kill their children. Kind of a funny line. What else? Page 24. One day, when it could hold no more coins, I would be allowed to break it, but it was far from full. It just sounded like a cool image to me. Page 27, my grandfather, but it was not my grandfather. It was really a waxwork of my grandfather, intent on selling me anatomy. I think this spoke to what Killian was saying about the repetition of certain phrases. I thought the dialect was good. I too listened to it this time, and so I liked that he read old Mrs. Hemstock's and Mrs. Hemstock's accent with a Scottish accent, but also I liked, and having read this like in book form before, I really liked that that dialect comes through in the writing. Somebody else read this. I think it might have been Tori. I read this from page 45. That's the trouble with living things. Don't last very long. Kittens one day, old cats the next, and then just memories. And the memories fade and blend and smudge together. So sad. I've had kitties do that. Thank you for being patient while I find my underlines in here. It's because these pages are not flush, like not flush cut. Actually, when I was working at Barnes & Noble, I had a customer once who tried to return pages like this because he thought it was a printing error. And I said, no, actually, it costs more for the publisher to print them like this. And he said, but I don't want them like this. I want them all cut flush. And so he wanted to exchange it. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but all the books on the shelf are going to be like that. He didn't believe me. I liked on page 64, he talks about when Ursula Monckton was wearing makeup. He said she had redone her makeup, her pale lipstick, and her big eyelashes. And there's something about that feels so fake to me, which I think is, of course, subtext for who she is, right? She doesn't look like the being that she's portraying herself to look like. And I think that speaks to that level of detail that Joe mentioned when he used his kitchen example, is that you can describe detail for detail what Ursula Monckton's face looked like, but for the narrator to simply explain like the falseness of the makeup is detail enough. Page 96. Rowanberry and red thread stop a witch in her speed, I recited. It was something I had read in a book. I love that he kept bringing it back to what he had read in a book. I thought that worked really well. Page 112. Why do you think she's scared of anything? She's a grown-up, isn't she? Grown-ups and monsters aren't scared of things. Oh, monsters are scared. said Letty. "That's why they're monsters. And as for grown-ups..." She stopped talking, rubbed her freckled nose with a finger. "Then, I'm going to tell you something important. Grown-ups don't look like grown-ups on the inside either." I thought that was very good. It also kind of made me wonder what grown-ups do look like. And then on page 123, I love this line. "Adults should not weep, I knew. They did not have mothers who would comfort them." Page 126. What I loved, and this kind of speaks to what I had said earlier about why the narrator is the protagonist. When Ursula says that the path is inside him, meaning our protagonist, that's central to plot, which you can see in my note now that I'm looking at it, it's backwards. So I don't know if when you watch it, it won't be backwards or not. I'm mirror image and all. But that is one of the keys to the hero's journey. Is your protagonist has to be the one that has to tell this story. There's no way around it, right? And that's what makes the story work. And then the last quote I'm going to pull out is on page 170. "He," meaning his father, "did not ask for a child with a book off in his own world. He wanted a son who did what he had done, swam and boxed and played rugby and drove cars at speed with abandon and joy, but that was not what he had wound up with." This also feels very biographical. Neil Gaiman was on an episode of, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the podcast. If I can think of it, I'll provide the link. But he tells a story of fathers and sons, and that was his father. His father did not really know what to do with a son who wanted to read and not box and play rugby and drive fast cars. And so I don't want to spoil it for you. I'll see if I can find it. It's a really, really good story though. Yeah, I think this went really well. I'm very impressed with what you all got out of it. In your responses about what you could incorporate in your writing, I thought that was really good because your next week's post is all about taking the lessons that you've learned from this book and channeling it into your writing. So if what you got out of this was description, then I want you to write Neil Gaiman-esque description in your next discussion board post. 250 to 750 words as usual. But I want you to take some element from this book and turn it right back into your fiction. Whether you want to tell a story like him, or whether you want to change the narrator to be a first-person protagonist, whether you want to tell the story from a 7-year-old perspective. Keep in mind that none of this has to actually end up in your draft. This is just something you can do for a discussion board post. Something to think about. There's often a motive that, when I find a writer that I find is particularly good with description, I go to a scene that I think is really beautiful. Let me start here. This is on page 7. "If you'd asked me an hour before, I would have said no. I did not remember the way. I do not even think I would have remembered Letty Hemstock's name, but standing in that hallway, it was all coming back to me. Memories were waiting at the edges of things, beckoning to me. Had you told me that I was 7 again, I might have half believed you for a moment. Thank you. I walked into the farmyard and went past the chicken coop, past the old barn and along the edge of the field, remembering where I was and what was coming next and exulting in the knowledge. Hazels lined the edge of the meadow. I picked a handful of green nuts, put them in my pocket. The pond is next, I thought. I just have to go around the shed and I'll see it. I saw it and felt oddly proud of myself, as if that one act of memory had blown away some of the cobwebs of the day. The pond was smaller than I remembered, and then so on. But I like to read a section and then immediately sit down to write. And some of you are like, oh, well, I really don't like that because it kind of influences, my writing voice. Well, it's just for a discussion board post. Like I said, it's nothing that's going to end up published. So, or it might, but it's just for the sake of the exercise. So give it a shot and see if that'll work. This next week's post, so this week 6 post, as indeed weeks 2, 3, or 4 are all fair game for your packet. Your packet is due, oh gosh, let me look at the due date really quickly. Monday, February 26th, so a week from tomorrow. For your packet, I'm sure you've noticed in discussion boards at this point, I don't comment weekly. I read them. I make sure that you all play nice with one another, which I don't have to worry about in this group because you guys are so lovely. But I read them, I read your posts, but I don't give you line by line feedback because I'm looking ahead to this packet. So in this packet is your opportunity for you to pick 2 posts. So again, that's weeks 2, 3, 4, and 6. So pick 2 of those 4 posts and turn them in and ask me questions. I want a minimum of 3 questions for each post with the intention that you get feedback. And I don't like to spend a lot of time on line editing or on formatting or on that kind of stuff. I want to give you the kind of rich feedback that will help your story. I ask for questions that don't quiz me. It's not stuff like, what time period does this take place in? Or, do you know what was around the corner? Right? I don't want questions like that. I want stuff like, do you think first person works for this story? Or, do you think that the conflict is strong enough with my main characters? Stuff like that. Like the nuts and boltsy kinds of things. Think about the kinds of things that we've been talking about in like PowerPoint lectures. You can absolutely ask me questions about showing versus telling because I realize that's still kind of a difficult concept. It's a very abstract concept for some of you, so I would absolutely love to help you with that. But think of your packet as an opportunity for me to help you with something. So what would that something be? I think that's about it. There's only one more thing I'm thinking of now, and that is start listening to Hamilton. It takes a while for the soundtrack to really make sense. I want you to listen to it like beginning to end. In one sitting possibly. I realize it's like 2 hours long. But there's only going to ever be one time when you listen to it beginning to end for the first time. So maybe if you haven't, then give it a shot. Listen for things like repetition and whatever. I realize that music is a kind of taste and that it isn't necessarily everyone's. If it's any consolation, I have never, not once, been interested in R&B, like ever. And I chaperone a lot of high school dances, so I've heard a lot of music that I could not care less about. But this grabbed me. And the reason it grabbed me is because of what was happening inside the lyrics. So listen to it. Give it a chance. I promise I have a motivation for it. Some of you are like, this does not seem like something I should be studying in an advanced fiction class. Trust me. Please, please, please trust me. So listen to the soundtrack. I'll give you another warning when it's about time that you should be reading the book, the Hamilton Revolution book. But just listen to the soundtrack for now. Give it a chance. Let it get under your skin a little bit. Hamilton is playing in at the Gammage right now. And I'm just going to be nerdy really quickly. There's a Hamilton app. I'm very excited. Where you can win a chance to buy tickets for $10 each with a maximum of 2. But you just go to the lottery and this is barely showing up on this screen, but it says that I can enter for the February 20th show. The show starts at 7:30. The lottery time closes on the 19th at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Winners can buy up to 2 tickets for $10. So kind of interesting. I would really love to go. And the whole reason I'm doing the lottery is because to go see the show, like full price, is like $850 for the nosebleed. That's crazy. As much as I love it, I would not pay $850. But I may or may not have hinted heavily, well, with my birthday next month, like, hey family, like, you know, You don't ever have to buy me a birthday present ever again if you buy me tickets for Hamilton. Oh my gosh, I'm so nerdy, guys. Okay, that's enough. I love you all. You're working very hard and I appreciate it. Keep up that work because you are the only person who can tell your story. And I'm just so impressed with all of you right now. So have a lovely week. Keep it up. Let me know if you have questions.